What's up, everybody? Thanks for the cue, James. It was a little awkward. It's been a long, wow, that came out pretty hard. It's been a long week of production, hasn't it?
Yeah,
and
we've been busy.
Yeah, it's already maybe 60 hours.
Oh, at least.
As of today.
No, I was part of broadcasting over 15 hours of content over a few days at 3-hour chunks. So
15 hours a day, probably.
Yeah.
But we still wanted to do a show.
Yeah.
We really, once you start a thing, you don't want to give up on it. No matter how tired we are, we're going to try to, it's that rain, snow, sleet.
Aching feet.
The
yeah,
mail,
we're going to be there.
The mail is going to come no matter what. I wish my mailman would actually learn that principle. But yeah, we're just gonna kind of grab bag today some real talk on everything, anything technically involving presentation media, house of worship media, academic education media, maybe even some consumer media, because this week was the big week for Apple.
Yeah, Worldwide Developer Conference 2017.
Oh, I don't think you can actually be in House of Worship Media and not be an Apple fan.
That's correct.
Except for me.
Yeah.
But I'm the enigma in life anyway. So give us a little update. What happened at the Apple conference this week?
They announced a whole new line of updating different products. Obviously, the big one, iOS 11, is always the big one. That's been the big one for years. So this is the big anticipation though for the iPhone 8 coming this fall. So iOS 11. But John, I've looked through iOS 11. It's mostly cosmetics. They've just changed the UI, just the interface. They moved some buttons around. They made it easier. Certain things like your dashboard, the dock's going to look different. They've made and here's the thing, John. A lot of the changes for iPad, and it's really where the changes were for iOS 11, are designed for iPad, iPad Pro, and the idea of moving away from your laptop and doing work on an iPad. Like it used to be, work was on your computer. You relax at home. On your iPad, you watch Netflix. Now they're bringing all those multitasking applications and things like Office. You need to be able to have an Office, email and a Word document open. So they made improvements to app switching, things like that. Things, for instance, files. So now you can bring in Dropbox, Box Files, Google Drive, OneDrive, including your Mac, iCloud Drive. So they're integrating more with some of the enterprise level storage. Nothing. It's good. Nothing radical though. I mean, there's nothing that just blows your mind. I mean, they've redesigned the App Store to make it easier to discover apps you like. Again, not a bad thing, but nothing. Nothing revolutionary.
App Store for iPhone, iPad, or
just the iOS App Store where you get your.
Is that different than the Apple TV App Store?
Yes. So the App Store on tvOS, I don't, there was an announcement on that. But just at least on your iOS devices, your App Store is going to be different. They said they've given some more features for Apple Pencil. So for those who have that,
hardware. What kind of hardware products?
Hardware. Well, the big one was HomePod. HomePod. So if you guys
to compete with Alexa,
you got it.
Amazon Echo and let's see,
the
Google Home,
the Echo Dot. Yes, all those. I don't even know what category do you call that? The home speaker. It's more than just a speaker, though. I mean, it's a home.
Well, it's definitely an IoT device.
Yeah, it's a new category that doesn't really have a name. It's just the
smart home type application. I guess.
So they've developed a HomePod. So I'm sure you're familiar, and our viewers are familiar with Sonos, and they kind of had this premier name of high quality Bluetooth sound.
Okay.
And so they've kind of taken the idea, some of that ethos of it's a beautiful speaker and it's great sound with the Siri idea, which they've been working on for quite a number of years. Yeah. And they've combined it into
Siri's horrible, by the way. And I don't think that's just my anti-Apple opinion coming out, because
Well, it's a joke in movies now. I mean, how many movies do they go, hey, I need, where's the nearest thing? A pizza place is right around the corner.
Yeah.
And
I think
make fun of that,
I hear a lot of Apple fans talk bad about Siri.
Yeah.
It's not been something that Apple has developed for the future. It seems like I don't know what's going on there. I know that they have a lot of money. They stockpile cash like it's going out of style, and
they're not short on money to spend. That's
right,
for sure.
and they spend money on development, but not on Siri development, evidently. So that's interesting that they would come out with a device that's competing with an Alexa or a Google Home.
It's directed exactly, and I think it's wanting to take your Bluetooth speaker and your Alexa and combine it in one, which is I think how they're justifying the $349 price tag.
The Amazon Echo is a Bluetooth speaker as well.
Yeah. And I haven't heard the quality of those. I mean, have you heard them?
They're consumer quality type. I mean, they're decent.
Okay.
Like I have the Dot, so no, that's not going to be something.
So if you have some friends over, would you use that?
Slightly better than just sticking your phone out there and playing it, but no, I would transmit that to a more high fidelity type speaker system like Sonos.
Okay.
I mean, Sonos is great.
So here's something that with HomePod. So this is what they say: place the HomePod anywhere in your room. It will detect the acoustics and analyze it, and then it'll adjust the sound based on that, on what it's feeling. So if it thinks there's a wall further here, then maybe there's a close wall here. It's going to change the way because it's surround sound music or speaker system. I don't know how you want it 360 sound. So I am curious. Maybe some of that technology that does interest me anyway. You can have two in one room. They have some neat features. A lot of this is if you own a Sonos, then there's nothing revolutionary for you. They've obviously built a lot of this to integrate with Apple Music, which is their Spotify-like streaming service. If you're into Apple Music and you're fully into the Apple, what do you call that? The universe, I suppose, of their products, then it could be good. The $349 price tag is pretty expensive. I mean, to just go, "Hey Siri, what time is it?" or "Hey Siri, what's the weather like?" when I already have it on my phone.
Right.
So, I'm not. It's good. I don't know that it's $350 good, but I think we're gonna have to see when it hits the market, and it's gonna hit right before the holidays. So that's gonna be key, is seeing how those sales work in I believe it's Q3 for them. And oddly enough, John, if you go to Apple's site and you click on HomePod, you will see in big, bold letters, "Technically Speaking," which I'm a huge fan of. It is.
So are you saying Apple endorses our show now?
That's what I mean. Sounds good to me. Does support Wi-Fi 802.11 AC, so that's nice. So they've
been on that for a little while.
They have, and but otherwise that was the big hardware update in terms of something you can bring in your home. Now they did do some hardware upgrades across their MacBook Pro and iMac lines as well.
Talk about the new iPhone. I think that's what everybody is really, really wanting to know.
Everyone wants to know about that iPhone 8. Well, they didn't confirm or deny any of those leaks we've been seeing the last I don't know how many weeks. All those manufacturers saying they have it. They didn't say anything about the 8. They kept it mum's the word in classic Apple fashion. Nothing exists until they announce it. But obviously they've released iOS 11 for the developers to look at and upgrade. And, iOS 11, they've done some nice keyboard improvements. Really, John, the biggest improvement to iOS 11 is ARKit. So at F8, I think we talked about this a few weeks ago. F8, Mark Zuckerberg's big idea was augmented reality, virtual reality, and using Facebook. He says that they're going to develop the first augmented reality platform. Well, Apple just released their AR framework. So this is where developers can come in, their apps can integrate augmented reality, pull in. So for instance, if I hold up my phone and I'm at a pool party, it's going to simulate fish jumping in and out of the pool. And so, that was kind of what Facebook was showing. They're doing their own framework. It is interesting. Apple's finally said, all right, we're going to jump in the AR, VR space. As you know, it's very expensive to get in that space. It's not cheap to develop any of this, even the frameworks. Anyone who, my friends who are VR developers, it's expensive just to even get a good headset, and so it's typically not something consumers are purchasing. Like, I don't know a lot of people that have, beyond my, probably the viewers of this, beyond this scope, a lot of people don't have VR headsets. They just don't need one. I have a phone, I have maybe a laptop, an iPad, and the watch is a big advancement. So VR hasn't really been an Apple's main point, but Apple's made some changes. They're looking to go pro. They're trying to bring the pro people back because they've been leaving
for GoPro. Is that what you
yes,
said?
they're now, they bought GoPro. I'm just kidding. No, they have not bought GoPro. But I could definitely see them buying the company like that. No, so they've here's the thing. In the hardware, since you brought that up, John, MacBook Pro. I've had people ask me, John, people go, hey, what kind of MacBook Pro should I get? And I'm like, don't get one right now, because they brought all the specs down. And if you're just using it to browse the web, check your email, they're fine. But you can also get a computer half the cost that can do the exact same thing. Now, they brought all the specs down to bring the cost down. The size, everyone wants smaller, lighter, thinner, which I get it. Computers are heavy. But I don't think that in their marketing plan, they really thought about the pro user, because all they did was take out, let's see, what's the cheapest graphics card we can put in here? What's the low, they had 1.7 gigahertz as their dual core as their laptop processing power, which it pales in comparison to even entry level at your local Best Buy. So I was just thinking, oh man, they're really leaving behind anyone who wants to do some video editing. I mean, video editing is booming right now. People are creating videos. They understand I need to be making videos, putting them on YouTube, on Facebook. So they were leaving all those people behind. So, a couple weeks, I guess it was a couple months ago, they brought in John Gruber, Lance Ulanoff, a couple of other top tech writers, 6 or 7. They brought them to their campus to talk about the new Mac Pro, which they're not releasing yet for another year, which is very un-Apple-like. But I think they realized, man, sales are going down. People are unhappy with this. Our pro users, not just people who want to do something more than, like I said, browse the web, maybe edit a couple photos. You've seen now they have a new line called iMac Pro. They say they're going to update the Mac Pro to be more modular. Their professional desktop model, if you can even call it desktop. So they're really looking to get back and get those people and get their confidence. They're getting in VR, AR, which is very more of a technical, professional space. So hardware changes. The big one, John, I think for House of Worship too, is iMac Pro. So if you are using ProPresenter or you're doing a lot of work at Adobe Creative Cloud, you should go at least take a look if you're in that Apple space and you look at the iMac Pro. So they've taken all those specs from the Mac Pro, 16 core, 18 core processors, high 32 gig memory, and they're bringing that to an iMac level. And they're saying they say, John, they're not going to make it the physical size of the iMac any bigger. So they're just going to put better parts, I suppose. So the hardware will be better. They say they're starting at a terabyte SSD, so that's good. I'm not a huge fan of Fusion Drive, for those of you who use that. So, Fusion Drive, where you have an SSD and then a big hard disk drive, and they were doing 5400 RPM, not great hardware. Now they're finally saying, all right, we're just putting 1 terabyte SSD, which is good. I mean, I've been on a Mac Pro that has 128 or 256 gig as the main drive. It fills up immediately when you do a video project. Cache files, After Effects. So now that you look there, John, all the marketing is waves and particles. It'll render instantly. So they're really fighting to get, I think, just all those Adobe Creative Cloud people, bring them back to the Apple world where they've kind of had the corner on the market for quite a while.
I don't know about that, but I do know that a lot of House of Worship guys use Mac. It's trendy, and just seems to be kind of the thing to do, especially if you're not a computer geek. It's easy to get into, and once you start learning it, it's pretty easy. It's intuitive to learn, I guess, from the ground up. I got into it a long time before the iMacs and the newer direction that Apple went with their computing OS. But so from a IT kind of geek standpoint, I see a lot of the deficiencies. But it's very good for plug and play, and I get why a lot of people want to use it, especially teenage girls and elderly ladies. It's just something you don't have to think about. it kind of works for you. Although the last couple of years, it's actually been a little more deficient in its plug and play ability. It still works really well, I think, but it's running into more challenges as it begins to open up to more manufacturers to offer softwares, things like that. Now, let the cat out of the bag. We have about 30, more than 20, somewhere between 20 and 30 Macs that we use here for our editing. And but when we really want to do heavy duty type editing, I mean heavy duty rendering and things like that, we're always on a Windows machine that we build. And I feel pretty bad towards the manufacturers of Windows machines as well, because they make them cheap and they don't do well long term with task. That's improved over the last few years. So I think there's kind of a balancing act to the consumer level of computing power that's happening. So to say Apple works better with the cloud or Adobe Creative Cloud is a misnomer. We're going to do an episode pretty soon about Mac versus PC, where we will actually put a Mac versus PC, some of the like a power what do they call
benchmark,
it?
I guess.
No, the power Mac. What's
Mac Pro?
Their trash can?
The Mac Pro.
The Mac Pro, yeah.
I don't know, trash can works for me. I mean, it looks...
You're a fan. Actually, we had two of them, and they work well. As a matter of fact, Kyle Stefanowitz was on the show last week. He was down using one of our trash cans, our Mac trash cans, to edit his awesome documentary on. And I was in there through some of the process, and he was having some problems. Just it was more Adobe than it was Mac, but the compatibility issues are across the board, whether it's a Windows machine or even our Windows machines. I mean, they're super powerful. We're talking about 32 cores.
But you still have a lot of that processing. Adobe has to still process all those bits of information.
And the Adobe engine has to work well and play nicely with all that, no matter what.
A lot of hardware
OS
configuration too.
Right.
I mean, it's
so you have to dig in and make Adobe do well, just across the board. No matter what platform you're going to use it on, Windows or the Apple OS. But that's a real interesting conversation. We'll dive much more into that on a show dedicated specifically to Mac versus Windows, or Apple versus Microsoft, however you want to frame that. We'll do some really poignant and heavy benchmark tests that can be done in real time, so we can show and analyze for ourselves as well as our audience. But we won't get bogged down too much into that famous debate right now. But that's a fun one. That's one that I want to be sharp for, and I want to be ready. I will say, if you want to get in on that debate, we more than welcome you to be a part of that show. We're trying to arrange ways that people can Skype in or call in or you could chat in with us. We want your engagement and activity on that topic, but the more the merrier, really. And it's all going to, I think that kind of information, wherever it lands and whatever you do with it, it's helpful. It's very useful knowledge, and that's what we are all about here at Technically Speaking, is that we want to be a resource, provide helpful, useful knowledge that makes technical media technicians better at what they do and hone in more and better on their craft. So that's why we do this, and it's just a lot of fun. It's our passion. It's probably your passion too if you're watching this, and it's just exciting to be a part of it. I get so we did an episode on NDI, but I
Right.
was able to take someone that was at the conference this week and show them our NDI process, and their head almost exploded. I saw it increase in size maybe 5 or 6 times, just because they were very excited.
Yeah.
They're passionate in the media field, in the technical media field.
Yeah. It's that
And
eureka moment where you see all the
it is.
possibilities.
Yeah, exactly. The
Wow.
creative possibilities. So that's I love that.
Yeah.
I love just being involved in conversation and debate, and just getting my hands dirty on that type of gear,
Yeah.
game-changing gear. So we want to bring that to you as well. But today we're exploring everything.
Yeah.
We want to talk about anything and everything. It's kind of a grab bag of topics. If you have a topic, message us or
Yeah.
chat with us. I saw, well, we're talking about ProPresenter since we were
Mhm.
there, and what iMac would you get as a ProPresenter machine?
Right.
Well, so if you see what we're doing here, we're in one of our auditoriums where this is the front of house for the auditorium as far as all the technical media is concerned, and we run ProPresenter 6 in this room through a fairly vintage Mac Pro, right?
Yeah, we'll call it the classic, the powerful.
Classic. Yeah, it's a big tower. It's
those
back
of you,
when the towers were this big,
and
and
they've got those 2 handles,
still
I
works,
guess, at the top.
and
Yeah,
it works great.
yeah, it does.
We do very mission critical, very media heavy functionality on it, and
Many
ProPresenter
times a week, not just on Sunday and when. I mean, it's
That's true.
4,
Yeah,
5,
yeah,
6 times a week where we
Yeah.
have something in here. That it needs to do.
it was performing task on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 8 to 10 hours a day.
Mhm.
So
three monitors, because we have our
ProPresenter is very solid. I'm
stage display out.
so happy
Yeah.
that we're in that ProPresenter world
Mhm.
where we
Yeah.
used to be in Media Shout a few years back, but and not downing Media Shout, but ProPresenter, I saw what the buzz was all about once we got into it, and it's an amazing
Yeah.
piece of software. By the way, I don't know if we talked about it in our NDI show, but you can make your ProPresenter 6 available on the NDI infrastructure. That's something you guys got to look into.
Yeah.
NDI is taking over, and as long as you have the SDI module, the NDI will actually work and broadcast to your
Mhm.
NDI network.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's see. Let's talk.
So what iMac?
iMac. So you will see a few right now. So you have the 21.5 inch and your 27 inch. So that's your starting point. Is what size screen do you want? The 27 inch. They start at a 3.4 gigahertz quad core Intel i5. Now this is a nice thing. The KB Lake processors are now across the board, so that's nice. They've updated to the newer Intel, these 7th generation, I believe, core processors. So really, at the 27 inch, your starter. If you have to get one today, let me start with this. If you have to get one today, I'd get a 27 inch. If you do want to go down to 21.5, do not get the non-Retina. So the non-Retina, John, they have a 2.3 gigahertz dual core Intel i5. For heavy media where you're needing to present, you have to have you have to have all that video ready to go.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have to have
Yeah,
videos
and
ready to go at any point, immediately store them. For those of you who use hot folders and maybe some of the more advanced features of ProPresenter, you've got maybe all those layers. You're going to want something better than that. Also, the Retina 4K display it's a bigger, nicer display, and Apple's priced it where it's only $200 more for to bump up to a quad core, and the speed goes from 2.3 to 3.0. So that's for $200. Do not get for $200 more. Don't get the standard display. You definitely want to be on that 4K Retina, and then from there, I'd get the 3.4 gigahertz version, just because of the again that speed. I would also bump up. Again, John, it astonishes me how iMacs, they start at 8 gigabyte RAM, and I'm like, this is a professional solution that you need to have things ready to go in your RAM, and you can fill that up quickly, especially if you're doing maybe this computer that does ProPresenter also does your Creative Cloud. You're going to want more than 8 gigabytes of RAM to handle Photoshop, After Effects, or Premiere, and so you have to configure that. If you get it from Apple, which now they've built the iMacs where you can't add in your own RAM, it used to be very easy. You now have to pay for that, but that runs $200-300 just to bump up to 16. So a little bit of a downer, so you may need to cost price that. But like I said, if you have to get that today, if you're willing to wait till I believe it's December, the iMac Pro line will be released, which is taking the power that's in the Mac Pro but putting it in the iMac on the iMac, I don't know what you call it, the box, I suppose. It's not really a box, but the iMac frame, and a lot of nice features in there. So they're going to start at a 1 terabyte SSD. They also they're claiming 10 gigabit Ethernet directly to the iMac. So they're saying they're building this as you buy 3 of these iMac Pros and you get a RAID configuration and you can just do it all through the network. That's what they're promoting. So again, the Pro, they're trying to making that distinction between, okay, you just want a big screen at your home to look at photos and watch Netflix, and this is for you need to do serious graphics processing. So I'd wait on the Pro just because they've got a better, like they're starting at 8 core for starters. I mean, it starts at 8 core, goes up to 18 core. Your memory starting at 32, and you go up to 64, 128.
So cut to the chase. What iMac would you suggest for a house of worship on a budget of less than $3,000 to
less than $3
spend on a computer plus ProPresenter?
Okay, then
and some of the modules that we use that
the
are very
SDI
useful.
modules pretty
so just think,
pretty common.
You got to come in under $3,000.
I would look at that 27 inch at that 3.5, so that's 2,000, and then by the time you get modules and any software you're going to want to add to that, if you can splurge, you get the 3.8 gigahertz, the quad core, and then if you really can wait till the fall, get an iMac. Just wait and get the iMac Pro where you can get real good, just great power there, and an 8-core processor, 32 gig of RAM, and a terabyte SSD. I would wait, but again, otherwise go for that 3.5 gigahertz, 5K 27 inch.
That's awesome. Speaking of ProPresenter 6 or ProPresenter in general, let's just talk a little bit about the history of that, since this is just grab bag and we're talking anything and everything. Love ProPresenter, already said that, but the architecture for ProPresenter, it was developed, so its origination and concept and architecture was built for the Apple OS. So a lot of how it works and how it was developed when they tried to cross over to the Microsoft side of things, the Windows platform, failed miserably, and really deterred people from buying Windows machines to use for their graphics in their church. I think I could get into some conspiracy theory there, but I'll let everyone else dwell on that. The thing is, the important thing to recognize is that it was an issue of architecture, and now their name's slipping my mind, that makes ProPresenter.
Renewed Vision.
Renewed Vision, yeah. They stripped it down, went back to the drawing board, and built up a Windows version
instead of just trying to port over what they already had.
Right.
Which doesn't work great for video applications.
And was a great idea. As well, Adobe did that when they did a reset to go to cloud. They really did a reset for Apple. That was a big plus for Adobe to have an Apple architecture behind the engine that you use for Adobe products. It was started on Windows, gravitated over to the Apple. Now they both have their own internal architecture to run the engines, and they do well on both platforms. I mean, yes, we're every day we're throwing apples, tomatoes, bananas at our screens, but it happens on both sides. No matter if if it's an Apple or Microsoft machine.
Mhm.
Renewed Vision did the same thing with ProPresenter 6. So there's a little bit of a myth out there that says, oh, you got to have a Mac now
Mhm.
to really effectively run the ProPresenter 6,
Yeah.
which is their latest. I think it's their latest. And that's just a myth. We run it on both platforms,
Mhm.
and we run it
We do.
successfully on both platforms. There are a couple
Yeah.
little things that you have to remember when you're on a different machine, but it doesn't affect
Yeah.
the execution part. It just
Yeah.
affects how you get there.
And I know personally, having run ProPresenter on Macs for years,
Yeah.
I'm still more comfortable on a Mac just because
Oh, yeah.
I've been doing it. But I think if I had started on Windows, I think it would also be just
Yeah,
as
but
just
it-
as natural.
You're talking about
It's just familiarity
little
is the
things.
big thing.
yeah.
But
It works well. Whereas on 5, we tried our Windows machines on 5, and it's just miserable failure.
yeah,
So they have resolved that issue. That's good to know.
yeah.
If you're looking at both platforms, the biggest thing for ProPresenter, the number one thing to contemplate to make sure you get right before you decide on what machine you're going to use is get the graphics card right. Really, that's the graphics card that makes the whole output engine
Yeah.
work well. And you have a lot of choices in the Windows world because it's so much more customizable than in the Apple
Mhm.
world. So you don't have that much choice.
Yeah.
You get what you get from,
Mhm.
like you were saying earlier, and it was developed to work with that.
Yeah.
So those specs were given, developed to work with that. But with on the Windows side of things, you do have to get the graphics card right,
Yeah.
and then other things will kind of fall in place and work well.
Yeah.
Another question from one of the forums is, and this is just a whole different direction, and that is talking about in the broadcast area, what cable to use for video. And it started with, hey, where can I buy RG59 to use? Back in the original cable days, 59 was used just because it was lighter. You could fit it around better. And the bandwidth wasn't necessarily as high. And it was great for also back in the old days, antenna TVs. So coming off your antenna, you would use that lighter weight to your big square TV. You know, you plug it in to your screw-in connector back then, RG59. But as technology progressed and the demand for bandwidth, as cable channels grew, as HD was implemented, you needed more bandwidth. And so now you really don't want to run, when you're in HD mode and you're running, even on the cheaper cameras, you have an SDI output, you're still running a lot of bandwidth back to your switch, or your ingest. You want to get that right, and you need to be using RG6. Can you use RG59? Absolutely. The cost difference is almost negligible compared to the safety that you get in bringing in your color spectrum and your luminance, and just the bandwidth needed to run that HD SDI signal through. You need RG6. Some of the drawbacks or cons is that RG6 is a bigger cable.
Yeah.
It takes more shielding,
Right.
and so it's not as flexible. It doesn't wrap as well. So there's some amenities there that you lose with RG6 as you do with RG59. But those amenities are not worth sacrificing signal quality. Signal quality, if you're doing this right, should be put a premium on it, and make sure your signal gets back, your sending signal at its highest throughput
Yeah.
no
You
matter
want,
what.
Yeah, you want high fidelity
Audio,
signal. Yeah.
video, no matter what it is, in your systems, your cabling part of your system, which we mark as our sixth system in our chart of systems
Yeah.
for technical media, and you got to get the cabling right. That doesn't mean you have to spend tons more. Just means you got to use the right cable for the right signal flow, and
Okay.
always pay attention to that. So I would say go on to Amazon. You can find RG6 all day long on Amazon bulk,
Yeah.
and that was the original post, I think, was where can I buy good
Mhm.
goodness. I better put that in my pocket.
Now let me ask you this. Now, what should if I'm on Amazon, what should I look for? Like, obviously RG6, but Quad Shield. Do you want to explain like what's the difference between Quad Shield and the other options for shielding? Like, is it worth it to pay extra for Quad shielding? Or I've been to Home Depot
Sometimes.
and they have some like it's super shielded, and I'm like I don't even know
Well-
what super shielding is, but they charge a lot more for it. I mean, is it worth it for short runs, long runs?
Yeah, it's not necessarily a lot. The difference is not a lot. It
Mhm.
might be 25% more. But yeah, quad shielding is good if you're doing installation jobs or maybe even underground jobs. It's a little better grade of shielding and material that they use to keep out the excess RF noise. So if you're running internally in walls or above ceilings and they got to run over lights, a lot of times there's electricity that's flowing and you just can't avoid having to run it close to emitters
Mhm.
of high intense frequencies, such as electrical frequencies and fluorescent lights, things like that. It'd be a good idea to use Quad Shield. We use it as a safety, just as a general idea.
Right.
Do you need it in every case? No. If you're running, 8 lines like we take out in our remote truck, and we
Right.
just are bundling them, putting them in a short-term location, running around the ground or on fields and things like that.
Yeah.
No, you don't. You don't really need that. And it does increase the flexibility a little bit. So if you have a grip that needs a little more rolling room and it's easier to roll, that's not a bad idea to go with the regular shielded RG6. But not a huge difference maker in mobile. Could be a difference maker in some install situations to get Quad Shield. So you just got to know what you're doing as far as the intent and the purpose, where the cable is actually running, in that consideration. But there is in RG59 to RG56, there is some signal loss. So because 59 is a smaller gauge cable, it comes with smaller and less shielding.
Yeah, it's a lot lighter. I mean, 100 foot of RG59 is not, or 300 foot is not the same as 300 foot RG6.
It's really easy to roll. So matter of fact, we ran into someone this week that bought RG59, not necessarily a video guy, but kind of learning the trade as he goes, because the simple reason was it rolled easier. Well, that's
it
not
does roll
necessarily-
easier.
It does.
It does,
You're not
but-
wrong, but you're also not getting your complete signal back. So if signal loss is not a big deal to you, then save a few pennies and get the luxury of an easy roll. Go with the RG59. But if signal loss is a big deal to you, which it is for us, then and I do have a signal loss document that just shows a little bit of the loss in 100-foot sections at your transmission rate. So, and you can just look at that. If the guys on the switch will put that up, that would be awesome. your decibel loss per 100 feet, you can see is quite significant. Not quite 100% or double the rate of loss, but it is quite significant. There, I'll just let you look at that for a minute so you can see that 59 is providing a great deal more loss even at 100 feet. Now, here's another common question that we get. What is really the terminal length of RG6 for a good video signal?
Right.
And we'll stay with the manufacturer recommendation, although we've done a lot of experimenting with this. It depends on your camera and standard camera. So let's just take an experiment we did with a Sony EX3, which is kind of the entry level of high-end broadcast, and it's a 3-chip camera, half-inch sensors, SDI, HD SDI outs, and we have gotten up to 420 feet with, and a lot of those measurements you'll see in meters, but if you do feet here in America, we do feet. So 420 feet we found was the maximum on a Sony EX3, but we rarely run it over 320 feet, which is more in line with the manufacturer's recommendation. So it's something that you really need to consider. But at 100 feet or 200 feet, you're well within the range of getting good, complete signal from one end to the other. So should you run a 59 or 6? We say 6 because of the signal loss.
Right.
And there you can see in that document the decibel loss per 100 feet. All right, I'll get out of that.
Right.
That was a good question, though, and let's go to there was another question earlier about cameras in the house of worship.
Okay.
And it was a great question. I think he was just exploring ideas, and guys that are doing really higher end production. So guys with big budgets, they're the mega churches, they're going to have more of a hard fence on this. And we work with mega churches as well as the 150 to 100 member churches as well. They all want to do media, and they need to do media, and they're trying to work media in with their budget. Most of the time that's a limitation, but the consideration is really what is your goal? What's your final output goal? If you can afford a Sony HSC 100, which is nearly a $20,000 camera, go for it. And you have to take into some consideration there, though you're going to be either in a Triax or one of the new fiber optic output models. So your cabling is going to be slightly more expensive.
It's not just a camera purchase.
Right.
I mean, there's some.
But that is a broadcast camera. And the way it's a 3-chip camera, 2/3. So really the biggest broadcast chips you can buy. And so it's going to be an excellent camera for that price. I would encourage you, if you could, and that was your only goal, to do broadcast and iMag, get into that. But if you're trying to dual roll your camera, and which I think this question brought up a good question for a lot of mid-sized churches, is they're trying to do cinematic type commercial shoots where they're shooting not advertisements, but they're promos, and maybe even funny bits and things like that you want to take out, running 24 frames, make it look cinematic, make it look good. Can you take that camera, if you get an SDI output on it, and insert it into your broadcast and
yeah.
iMag setup? I think that's a great question. Those are things that really should be considered, and I think for most churches, they should consider that their cameras, because they have a limited budget, their camera purchase should be
multi-purpose.
a very multi-purpose approach. So let's take an FS7.
Okay.
And we've got good experience with the FS7.
Yeah. I was using it today, actually. I didn't use it, but I took it out and was showing someone it today who was curious about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a hot camera, and
it is.
Sony,
Looks
beyond Sony.
Great. The output is amazing.
Yeah.
And but why don't we use an FF7 for our broadcast setup? Well, we have a little bit different budget scheme here. So we're an academic facility. We have cameras we can lean on that don't need that. But if I was in a 500 church person, let's say 3 to 700, that range, I would definitely want to dual purpose my camera purchases.
Right.
So an FS7, you could get 2 for what you could get, at least 2 with some good lenses. What you could get a Sony HSC 100 for. So now you have 2 cameras that you can option in and take out, which is a luxury when you go to do some cinematic shoots.
Right.
And
just change out your lens and get a different look, and shooting
raw,
just
two
shooting
different fixed
live,
lenses on it. Maybe even a zoom lens for your broadcast.
Right.
You have a little more room to work with your budget to get those kind of things. Will it work in the house of worship? I say absolutely. If you're going to take it out onto a sports field and do high-paced action shots, football games, basketball games, things like that, not going to work as well, especially if you're trying to broadcast that. And there's a great article if you go into the Church Sound and Media Techs forum, and if you're in House of Worship and you're not in Church Sound and Media Techs forum, just says, what's wrong with you? You should be, because there is a plethora of information and guys that are great at what they do. They're so a lot of experience to answer questions for the guys that don't have experience. And then there's just a lot of sheer great debate that goes on.
Yeah.
So things that stimulate thought, and this is one of those topics. And Stefan Svard, who was on one of our earlier shows this season, he posted an article, not that he wrote, but it was a great article. I think if you can find that thread, and we'll post the article in our show notes, that talk about image sensors and why they're important, what you should know about it. We won't go into all that today, but when you get an FS7, you're getting a single sensor instead of 3 sensors. So, or we call them chips. And there's a reason that they have those models of cameras built with single chips and some built with 3 chips. There's a perfectly good explanation for that, to say there's so many different types of product that you can make through video. It now demands an industry to provide specific specs, and when you read that article, it will become a lot more clear to you as to why. If you're just getting started and you're trying to find out what you should purchase. So I lean to, if you're concerned about your budget, get a FS5 or an FS7. They do high frame rates, and you can do some really cool cinematic stuff, as well as get back to a broadcast rate that's not going to be high impact. Slow pans, slow tilts, slow zooms will be fine on a camera just like that. It's when you get to that high action pace, you need those 3 chips to compensate and calculate.
And so Sunday Night Football's a top broadcast on TV period for the last 5-6 years or so, and I've seen them. They don't use it for every camera, obviously, but for some of their cameras, they actually use the F55, which is typically billed as a cinema camera, but it can be used for broadcast as SDI out. And then again, it's all about how they tell their story. But just to give you an example, they use that in live broadcast. Even though you go, don't just go to the site, Sony's Pro site, and go, oh, this is a cinema camera or this is broadcast. If you understand the camera,
but use it in a very specific way for a cinematic shot, for capture. It does high frame rate.
Yeah,
and
which is great for.
It's not what they put
need.
on a. It's not what they put on a standard pedestal or tripod.
Well, yeah, they're using
capture the fast action.
Yeah.
So they're using them and the big sensor, the 4K sensor, to capture things so that they can blow it up.
Yeah.
But it's more in a still action way, not a moving action way. So you got to really calculate that. We have a 55 as well, so we're able to do those tests and figure out what the problems are, why they're problematic. And I can tell you that article was dead on with our findings and practical experience, because we have both sides. We have broadcast cameras and cinematic cameras. We're a Sony house, full disclosure there. So we use a lot of the Sony products. We've had some Panasonics and a couple other brands. And they do well, but we just kind of favor the Sony brand because they've been great to us as a manufacturer. So that's that on cameras.
Okay, so I want to get your take on this, John. One of the top questions in Church Sound on the last day. What is the best approach to transitioning a band to IEMs and personal mixers who prefer stage monitors or don't want to switch?
So what's the question?
What is the best approach to transitioning a band to IEMs and personal mixers?
Well, I don't know.
It's a vague question. I mean, you don't know
but you just have to do it, and it takes some getting used to for sure.
I mean,
here, if the question is leading more to how do we argue to get our band over the mental hump of transitioning from a wedge mix to an in-ear mix, well, I can think of some good arguments for that. Number one, it cuts down tremendously on stage volume. So in small church applications, it is very, very, very beneficial, more beneficial than even in the megachurch, because the stage volume really pollutes and the sound quality, the sonic value to the house, and it dilutes that sonic experience from being good to just being very average or maybe even bad. So that is where I would start in my argument of transitioning the why, as to why should we build an in-ear network for everyone to use. There's no getting around. It's a huge practical transition for people. Listening, just having something in your ear, there is some psychoacoustic stuff that goes on that when you're plugging your ear, although it's like wearing headphones and the sonic value is clear, you're still shutting off the ear canal, and the natural ambient feel of things is
it's going to feel different.
It just feels different, and it's very uncomfortable. And a lot of times you'll see people, take out one ear.
Right, I see that all the time.
Starts, and it's because their brain is just craving that ambient structure. That's I just got to feel that analog, that what's happening in real time there. And
I think a lot of that sometimes has to do with they're too high, like they're the only one in their mix. So so they go, oh, I can only hear me, I can't hear something else. Let me take out.
So if they're building an in-ear system, another great argument is, hey, you can mix yourself, and you can do it when you want to do it.
Okay.
You don't have to wait for your front of house engineer, because
Mhm.
most applications I find that the front of house guy is also mixing monitors.
Right.
And in some big churches you do have a separate monitor mix, which is a luxury, but at any point you have to have a discussion, and it takes time,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of communication. I find communication errors of, give me more, give me less,
Yeah.
of what, and then it's just a lot of banter. When you can just dial in on your own personal mixer, you're in your mix.
Mhm.
So I would always try to get now with the economic value of in-ear systems, you can get 16 channels to mix with in a personal mixer very economically.
And that's good for what,
Inexpensive.
90% of applications? 16 channels is enough.
Oh, was it really
Yeah.
anything? I find that those 16 channels, that's all an output kind of idea. There are a couple manufacturers that have more than 16,
Yeah.
but most are 16, and really that's going to be plenty. You could get those pared down in mixes, so a stereo channel can have all your keyboard mixes, and remember, you're not trying to spend time and do a front of house mix. You just want to get the general idea in your ears so that
Mhm.
you can get a good a sound that you're
Yeah.
comfortable with.
So I guess the main reasons then are, I guess, start with 2 ears if you're transitioning. If you have never done it, maybe start with 2 ears at first. 1 ear.
Well,
What do you think?
just need to practice. You never
Yeah.
transition in a live service.
Oh no, I'm just saying, even in
Um,
practice, like,
so
should everyone have 2 ears in?
I think it's
Or
going to be different per person.
kinda different.
It's a very individualistic scenario. So just put them in
Yeah.
and sit with them, listen, try to get used to it, because there's another thing, especially if you're a singer.
Mm.
You're singing now, your head voice is, you're not hearing externally. Just close your ears and you can hear now what's the vibrations inside of your head.
Mm.
Doesn't feel like it's coming outside of
It's
your head.
completely different.
So it is. It's a different way. It's a different feeling,
Yeah.
and you just got to get over that hump.
So there is that, but on the plus side, you get your own mix. It's going to be personalized. It'll be
Yeah.
quicker than having to ask someone
Yep,
to make a change
sure.
to a wedge, and improved performance on stage, I'd imagine. I mean, that's one of the key.
Well,
main,
for the audience, it's going to be a better experience because all the sound that usually is happening in those wedges has now been reduced or cut out altogether.
Yeah.
So
Does that make the room quieter? Because that's gonna. I know pastors are gonna say, "Hey, well, if I go to an IEM, everyone complains it's loud, or people complain it's loud. Will that make that problem go away?"
no,
Okay.
no. That's all going to be subject to how hot your front of house is running.
Right.
If they feel it got quieter and they run
They
it
can
hotter,
just go right
it's going
back,
to be
so.
just as hot as it was. So that's a different conversation. But what it does is it clears it up. It cleans it up. So when you have wedges and they're really hot, which most of the time they will be because you got a lot of competing sources.
Right.
So guitar players competing with the piano player. I need more in my wedge, or I need more of this, or historically
Yeah.
the singers. I just need more, and it's always more.
Need more of me in
They're
the
trying
monitor.
to get
Yeah.
more of me and less of everybody else. But if people are sharing mixes, it's just everybody's answer is to make it louder.
Yeah, and you have to do that with
louder.
wedges. You can't just
So-
set out 13 of them as.
So you have a very loud stage, and now that energy is being reflected usually off of a back wall coming back, and it's a very low end resonant value that's getting back into the audience that is sound masking the clarity that's coming out of the front of the house. So while you can still hear the front of house, it is still masked with that rumble and that low end as far as the frequency that we're talking about resonating off of the stage, and it just makes it harder to create clean sound in the audience.
So you'll get a better sound with IEMs. I mean,
Yep.
use that, I guess, if you're explaining. This will be a better sound, better experience for your audience.
Yeah.
And they'll hear you better, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, not
you-
maybe. It's 100%. It's going to clean it up.
Yeah,
So
So if you,
it's
so
a
if-
better experience in the audience. It's just going to.
Yeah.
It just will be.
and you just have to explain that to your band, your vocalists, the benefits of that. Thank you, John. Looking through
Let's see.
what else
I'm
we got.
looking through some other topics that could be discussed in the last few minutes here.
Let's see.
See anything good, James?
Oh, someone's thanking Meyer Sound for their speakers, and we talked about that last week. They have some.
Myers is
Here's
great.
an interesting one. So I told our drummer that we were going to start using a click, and he is not amused. We're at a small church, and he is the only drummer. He's only been playing a couple years, self-taught. He hasn't had any musical training. He can keep the beat okay, but doesn't do well with tempo. Plays the fast songs in halftime, that kind of stuff. He said the click will just throw him off. I told him I've told him I've been playing live and recording, and clicks make a huge positive experience. So how do you explain that? You don't want to move to a click.
Well,
You just say we're doing
so
it.
here's
or-
the deal. And he's not the first one that's ever said that. And I've
Yeah.
heard that many times. And we work with a lot of bands, a lot of young
Yeah.
instrumentalists, drummers included.
Mm.
So here in our structure,
Mhm.
you can't play unless you can play on a click. It's just mandatory.
So you just set that
So-
requirement. You play
Yeah.
in this room.
and so it's something that is embedded into the culture now.
Mm.
So, and I would encourage every church to always take that approach. It's an approach moving towards excellence. Timing is a huge issue, and being in correct time and being consistently in time allows you to be more creative. It's not a structure that limits you. It's actually a structure that opens up more possibilities.
Yeah.
If you're, and I'm gonna give you one of many scenarios, but we don't have time to run through all the
Yeah.
scenarios. But here's the deal. If you can't stay on a click, and it's very popular to run stem tracks.
Right.
So stem track is an extra sound from a playback engine such as Ableton or some computer or some type of device that is playing back in time. Well, all of those stems are playing in a specific BPM, beats per minute. And if your live drummer isn't staying within that beats per minute, now you're getting off and the song is beginning to get off. And the next thing you know, you might be a measure behind if your drummer can't do it, and it's just going to sound like a train wreck. And it's
Goes
it's
back to
just
the
a-
audience experience. You
yeah,
go right back to
it's
that.
an absolute must. So the creative value is if your drummer can play on a click and the rest of your band can play with
Mhm.
a click, then you can add creatively those extra sounds and stems, what we call stems.
Mhm.
You can add those in and create a much more fuller, a richer sound, a more clear sound, and it does attribute to a better experience for the audience. And after all, isn't that why you're doing what you're doing in the
Right.
first place? So it's a more excellent approach. The only reason a drummer would say, I don't want to play to a click is just it's fear of messing up. And
I think you touched on it right there. I think it's fear.
It is,
I'm
it's
used to
absolutely-
this, and I know I can play this, but I don't know if I can do that, and I
Yeah.
don't want to make
Yeah.
myself
and
like a
and
fool.
Right. So
Um,
you don't want to, if you're on a click and you know now you've got to be rigid and you got to hit every beat. Well, if you don't do that, now it exposes you. So
Mm.
there's a fear mechanism that goes on
Yeah.
there. And what you do is you just gently help get them to a place of understanding of why it's so important.
Mhm.
And then once they understand the importance of that, and that just comes from good leadership. You velvet still. You you stand your ground and say, this is our culture, this is what we're building, but you're kindly leading them into the better way. And it's not a negotiable. We call them non-negotiables. This is the way it is. This is the way we do, because it leads to better experience for everyone, and that is what our end goal is.
So maybe a couple extra practices, just get used to it.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
I wouldn't just go
not,
one Sunday to the next at a click. I mean,
Yeah.
I think if you're a sound, you're an engineer, you need to give them some space to learn. But don't do it immediately. But I think, like you said, I think it's fear. All right, there's another question on here. What is everyone using for choir mics? Earthworks, AKG, Shure?
Oh, I'm sure that thread was full of a lot of answers.
Oh, there are quite a few on here. Someone actually mentioned Rode.
That would be interesting.
They did the Rode M3 or M5.
Rode broadcast stuff,
Mhm.
but and we have used Rode shotgun mics creatively for choirs and ensembles and
Yeah.
things like that. But I don't know.
Got
the
AKG C1000
line
on
well
here. Yeah, well, I was just one of the comments.
Yeah,
But the C1000's listed on here.
AKGs. Just depends on if you want to go large diaphragm, small diaphragm. Small diaphragm, I think, Shure has a good rap on that market. Suspended small diaphragm choir mics. Depends on the venue, really, and what is going on. Large condenser mics are not something you really want to use in a very open and loud stage. So if you have a lot of monitor wedges,
Okay.
back to that argument.
Well, with
you
choirs, don't you typically have monitor wedges? Isn't that just kind of the common? Because you have 100 people, you
Yeah.
can't do 100
Yeah.
IMs.
And so you
expensively
don't want
right
to use
now.
large diaphragm studio type condenser mics in those situations. You can, but the way you EQ them and they're just so sensitive. So a smaller diaphragm usually works well in that, and suspended, so you can get the mic closer to the source.
Okay.
So when you come over the top, and you can drop mics in, and you have a choir that's 3 or 4 rows deep, then you can get those mics very much closer to the source, and you can hang more of them.
Okay.
And so in large church settings, I've seen, or not even large, but larger, I guess, you'll see those on a wire mics. And the reason is they're trying to get condenser mics close to the source. And that's a good strategy.
Also, maybe a little bit easier rearranging stages. I mean, they're just
Yeah.
there, and you don't have to move gear and
It's
repatch.
it's definitely a permanent setup. In
Some benefits there.
So if your venue is a temporary venue and you don't get the luxury of permanent install, and
Church plants where they're church plants there every single Sunday.
Upstarts in schools and other venues. You use boom mics, and you kind of lift the boom mics up, and you stretch them out as far as they can go. But then you gotta really be careful. Are you using monitor wedges? And sometimes the larger diaphragm does help pick up further away from the source. So we found that using like the Rode and the Audio-Technica shotgun mics really reach out and get the source, capture the source very well. So there's a lot of good options. I think you've got to just customize it to your venue and how loud is your source. Is it a big choir, small choir? All those
How
things
loud are they
come
singing?
into play.
That.
And why you would choose a small diaphragm as opposed to a large diaphragm.
All right.
But a condenser mic is going to be really the only solution. The only good practical solution.
So no dynamic on choirs.
Yeah, it's just not practical. Not practical. As a rule of thumb, you wouldn't want to use that.
So if someone's telling you get a dynamic microphone for a choir, just smile and nod, and don't do that.
Yeah, that's not the way of the Jedi.
Got
Anything else?
Got any, since we're on mics, got any suggestions for kick drum mics? Someone asks, what do you use? Brand models. And then this is interesting. Single mic or double mic?
Man, I mean, this gets down to creativity and
Yeah.
what if you have the luxury of a lot of inputs, then you can do more things. I've approached kick drum miking a myriad of ways, so I don't adhere to saying there is one right way to do it. I think the Shure Beta 52 is an excellent choice for if you had one mic to use. The D112 by AKG is a fantastic mic. There are a lot of, I mean, just go look into the instrument list and the packages that the manufacturers offer. These top line manufacturers are going to make good quality stuff. Heil makes a good mic. I think if I were to double, so I'll give a scenario. If I were to double mic, one of my more favorite approaches, I had the inputs to use, and there was a sound hole on the non-batter side, so on what if you're the audience, the front side. So you generally see that mic there, and just place it right there at the sound hole. There a lot of the low end is expelling right there. So this is a dual mic approach. So I'm capturing only low end from that mic. I EQ that to be sensitive only to those lower frequencies, everything below 100, really.
Okay.
And I think if you were to see my EQ, it all comes out to around, it lets in a little boost at 90 to 85 to 90, but you're going to see at 65 where the peak is. So a 3 to 5 dB gain raise boost in at the 65 to 60 range. Well, to a properly tuned 22-inch kick drum, that you would get great low end exposure to the mic, to the mixer. So taking the other side on the batter side and using a 57 and getting close to where the pedal batter of the pedal is attacking the front, we call that the batter head, and getting that close to where the batter head hits the I'm tired, man.
Yeah.
I'm losing
I got you though. It's the drum,
head.
but
you EQ that to get that 2K to 5K attack, and then EQ all the low end out. So now you have two mics doing a very specific thing. So a properly processed through your speakers, hearing that way that kick drum sounds, you want plenty of attack, you want plenty of low end. Marrying the low end to the bass is really the idea there. So you want to feel the drum, which is going to come from the low frequencies, but you also want to hear the drum. So
just that 2 to
which
5,
is that attack and that transient that's there just makes the kick drum feel like it's breathing. So that's a luxury of a dual miking approach. But if I were to use a single mic, which we do right now, we shove our Beta 52 all the way in, and it's about, well, when I say all the way in, it goes in from a mini boom stand through the sound hole, and it's maybe 5 to 6 inches off the batter head. So we really shove it in there deep to get close.
I was going to ask you, I've seen that asked too, how close do you put that mic? Some people said put it into.
Yeah, we want to really capture the attack and be able to do, so it's a single mic approach where we're trying to get a lot of attack, and there's a lot of boom in that drum. So you're still going to capture a lot of the low end as well. So that is my audio pro tip for miking drums today.
But
I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it.
I know there's a lot you could even go off there. I mean, like you said, there's creativity to it. It's not but a 52A on the front isn't bad at all.
No,
it's perfectly acceptable.
Not at all. Absolutely.
And that mic is I'm looking on Sweetwater right now. It's $189 for that. So it's not like a $3,000 special studio mic. I mean, it's I'd get that. All right, I'm looking on here. That's
I have also used a large diaphragm condenser, the Audio-Technica 3030. It's discontinued right now, but if you can ever find a 3030, man, it's a fantastic large diaphragm to put on a kick drum.
Yeah. All right. Let's see.
Anything else we should talk about on Grab Bag Thursday? My voice is about
got
gone.
any good stories from broadcasting or live production this week?
Man,
plenty.
we have like funny stories. I'm sure we can tell. But we came up with a concept, so maybe one day we'll put this to reality.
Yeah.
And make a office type show, but call it the booth or front of house or something like that.
Front of house.
That would be
Netflix,
awesome.
pick us up. We've got our executive producer here.
There is some hilarious things that go on in production. That'd be fun. Like we should query the forums as to what, like each week have everyone chime in with their funniest happenings.
Yeah, we could
from
have
the week.
all the usual.
I bet there's some great stories out there.
Make a whole episode about a cable going out, but can't figure out which one.
We could collect their stories, get them to sign off on it, and then we actually shoot that would be
great.
Shoot it as an episode. That would be so much fun.
That would be. Yeah, and I know I'd watch them all, but.
Well, all right, guys. I think that's our hour.
Yeah.
We've at least been on an hour.
Yeah.
So we wanted to get in there, even though we're exhausted from already a long week of production.
But man, we love what we do. We really do.
This is a lot of fun. We hope that we're being beneficial to you, and we're as the summer and fall rolls around, we're going to cut in and do some very Tech in 60 type episodes. So in 60 seconds, we'll define whatever it is. So if it's a microphone, we'll give you all the stats about it. We'll do it, rattle it off real quick. So those are some concepts that were coming up. But this is a fun, I love the talking head talk show environment that we're creating here, and a lot of good responses in the past episodes. This is very helpful. We've already got we also send this out to pastors and music pastors and creative pastors.
And really even worship pastors that are now getting into media.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have to be. They have to be up on it. So we see the benefit here, and we're going to keep doing this. If you want to be a part, man, let us know.
Yeah.
Private message us or tweet at us. Email us.
At John Cookman on Twitter, at James Lex on Twitter.
DMLTVmail at gmail.com will be a good one. That's DMLTV, Digital Media Labs TV, DMLTV mail at gmail.com. Feel free to email us any ideas, suggestions. If you want to be on the show, we'd love to have you on the show. Just let us know. I know a lot of guys, man, they're behind the camera for a reason. It's funny because we try to get some guys that are out there that are they're great at what they do. But man, they're scared to death to get in front of the lens. And we're trying to convince them that their value would be exponential if they.
But I ask them one question about a mixer, and they could go for 2 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just crossing the threshold. We'll get them there. And thanks, guys, for listening and being a part, and your comments and suggestions. They're always helpful. And hopefully we've been helpful to you as well. So until next week, I think you're off next week, and I may be here by myself. I'll probably bring in a Skype colleague to hang out, and we'll do some more audio. I think we're going to tackle audio next week and have a lot more fun. But until then, hopefully you'll sit under the spout where the glory comes out. The blessing of God will rest upon you just 7 times over. Have a good night.